Welcome back to another impactful episode of the PSTA podcast. It is Craig King, your host, and I know. Let's state the obvious. You've missed us. It's been 2 weeks.
It's been hard.
I know. You've missed us. All of our fans out there, you were looking for an episode last week, and you didn't get it, and you were wondering if Patrick and Craig took off to Alaska. That is not the case.
No. But the generation that's grown up with streaming TV doesn't get this because, back in the dark ages, the 1900s, you'd have like that 1 week where your favorite TV show didn't show the new episode.
Yes.
We've lived through this. We were built for it.
Yeah, we were definitely prepared for it, Patrick. But anyway, a lot going on. If you don't know, Ed Camp Palmetto is happening this Saturday at Charleston Southern University. So if you haven't signed up, please sign up. We are preparing for a great day.
March 1st.
So join. It's free. Register. Bring your friends.
Free plus food plus swag.
Oh, man, the swag is yeah. We went through the swag today. It's pretty awesome. Bills didn't play this past Sunday. 49ers didn't play.
No.
There's no football actually happening
which means
right now.
nobody lost.
Nobody lost. We're undefeated. But we have a lot to get to, so we're going to jump right to it, Patrick. So the past couple of weeks, a lot's been going on since our members last heard from us. So we have a laundry list of things, so let's jump right into it.
Let's go.
The Educator Assistance Act, where are we right now?
The Educator Assistance Act right now is sitting in the South Carolina Senate. It's been assigned to the Senate Education Committee. The Senate Education Committee has received a deluge of communications from teachers across South Carolina requesting a subcommittee hearing, and that's where we stand. The next step in the process is for the Senate to schedule that bill for a subcommittee hearing. So people that are passionate about this bill need to be contacting their senator, but they also need to be contacting the Education Committee specifically, because the way that the legislature works is the chair of every committee controls the calendar for their committee. So it's up to the committee to determine when and if a bill gets a subcommittee hearing. That's the next step. That's what we need to see happen.
Yeah, so if you are focusing your attention, it is solely on your senators right now.
That's right.
The House has done their work. There's no need for you to email your House member. They have done the job. They have probably voted it for this bill. I think it passed unanimously. So we need you to contact your senator.
Yeah, and here's the fun fact. Since the House passed the bill unanimously 4 times in 2023 and 2024, some of our current senators, Ott, Nutt, Lieber, who came from the House, they've already voted for this thing as a member of the House. So we need this to get a subcommittee hearing so that Senators Ott and Lieber and Nutt can get an opportunity to vote for the thing now that they're over in the Senate.
Absolutely. And if any of our listeners out there are from Lancaster, Edgefield, or any of our student chapters, you will have that opportunity to do that this week during your Hill Days. Shameless plug for Hill Days. Shameless plug.
But perfect plug.
Yes, sir. So we know the budget kind of got kicked off in the House Ways and Means last week. So what is the timeline for the budget? Some of the highlights as it relates to education that our members can expect.
Yeah, so last week, which would have been the week of February the 18th, I had to do some math in my head real quick. The House Ways and Means Committee adopted their proposed budget for fiscal year 2026, which in teacher world means the 25-26 school year. That budget proposal now goes to the House floor. It will be scheduled for debate the week of March 11th, so we're about 2 weeks out from that, after which point the budget goes over to the Senate and works through the Finance Committee and through the full Senate and on to Conference Committee at some point.
Right.
So we're a long way from the finish line, but what the Ways and Means Committee proposes tends to be a really good outline of where we ultimately end up. And there's some exciting things in the Ways and Means budget in the K-12 education space. There's an additional $20 million to fund safety-related facility upgrades in schools. There's about $30 million to expand summer reading camp opportunities for students, about $30 million for new instructional materials, largely aligned to the new math standards. There's almost $7 million for a school leadership accelerator pilot that Superintendent Weaver asked for, as well as $5 million to expand her strategic compensation pilot into year 2. So there's a lot of new money, but the highlight, the one that people always ask about is, well, what about teacher salaries? And what the Ways and Means Committee budget proposes is increasing the state aid to classrooms program by about $112 million. Just if you're not living in the dorkiness of budgetary line items in the South Carolina budget, the state aid to classrooms program is over $4.5 billion annually. It is the single largest recurring appropriation in the state budget, and that's the money that flows from the state to the local districts, or the vast majority of that money. That $112 million increase over last year would fund an increase to the statewide minimum salary schedule of $1,500 per cell in the bachelor's, master's plus 30, and doctorate lanes. I didn't say the bachelor's plus 18 lane because the Ways and Means budget proposes eliminating that lane. Now, this is a little different animal than last year when the governor proposed eliminating everything except bachelor's plus master's, because in that world, a lot of teachers, master's plus 30 and doctorate, would have been looking at a pay cut. Because the current salary schedule, bachelor's plus 18, is only $500 beyond bachelor's at every step, the $1,500 raise to the bachelor's lane will capture the plus 18 lane and pull up those individuals by $1,000 per cell, plus they get their step increase. So nobody's looking at a pay cut like what the governor was proposing last year, although, to be fair, he proposed a hold harmless provision.
Right.
Everybody's looking at a pay raise. It's just if you're one of the 3,400 teachers in the plus 18 lane, if you're not moving off plus 18 toward masters, which is what a lot of people in that lane do, next year you would be looking at a $1,000 increase per cell plus your step.
And so it's safe to say that this is the House version, the House Ways and Means version of the budget. Mm-hmm. And even when it goes to the full House, debate is going to happen. And typically, Patrick, when the Senate gets the budget, sometimes there's a different outlook on the dollars that would be coming into the state. And so the Senate may look at what the House has done and say, hey, we can increase that, for example, teacher salary a lot more and maybe get us to that $50,000. We don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair because between now and when the Senate finishes their work, the state's Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office will give another economic update projection to the state, and it may have additional money in it based on revenues to date. In that instance, the Senate can raise teacher pay if they choose. Nothing is certain, but typically the Ways and Means proposal is the baseline,
right,
and people work up from there. So for people that want to advocate for salaries, you can do so obviously on the House floor, contacting your representative. You can start talking to your senator. But one other thing that I want people to be aware of that we'll be kind of emphasizing to PSTA members now that we've gotten to get under the hood and look at the actual appropriations and lines in the budget is the Ways and Means Committee is not following the governor on two important things. Number one was the governor wanted to raise teacher pay by $3,000 per cell to get statewide minimum to $50 this year. The Ways and Means Committee is committed to getting it by 2026, which was the original plan. But the Ways and Means budget also is not following the governor's proposal to fully fund the employee contribution to healthcare premiums. And so under the Ways and Means budget for the last 12 years, the state has picked up the tab of increasing costs so that nobody's monthly health care premium went up. They're not proposing to do that. They're proposing to cover part of the cost. And the projection is that the average South Carolina state employee or school district employee would be looking at about a $36 to $37 increase in their monthly premium. That's a big deal because a $1,500 raise plus a step doesn't feel quite as good
right
with your take-home pay if your healthcare premium's going up $36 a month.
Yeah.
So that's going to be another thing that we're going to be focused on and that I think would be an effective use of advocacy efforts to push for fully funded healthcare cost increase as the governor put in his executive budget.
Great note there, Patrick. And so you heard it here. When you're contacting your members of the House, even for a floor debate or the Senate, before they get a crack at the budget, that's a great point for you to advocate for in addition to the increase in salary. Anything else on the budget before we kind of move on to some other bills?
Nope, we got it.
All right. So we have the non.
Oh, wait, I lied.
Go for it.
One thing about the
you
salaries.
didn't lie, Patrick.
No, I
just
did.
forgot.
Well, okay,
you just
fine.
forgot. Come on, man. Grace, extending grace is my thing. Okay.
I love that, Craig.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Let's do it.
The only thing I'd emphasize is when people look at the projected salary schedule, which we've sent out to PSTA members twice now. We'll probably send it out another time before March 11th. Remember, that's the proposed statewide minimum.
Right.
And most districts pay beyond that. So I've gotten emails from people saying, but you said everybody got an increase and this looks like a cut. Well, that's because your district's already paying beyond the statewide minimum.
And they're not mandatory.
And that's right. Everybody's just got to pay at the statewide minimum. Now, if your district's already beyond the statewide minimum, they're getting extra money next year. That state aid to classrooms dollar, that $112 million increase, is allocated to districts on a proportional basis based on a couple of different calculations. So everybody's getting more money next year.
Right.
But the salary schedule, if you look at it and you go, oh, I'm getting a pay cut. No. Your district's beyond the state right now. What will then become the issue for you is, does your district maintain the level beyond the state minimum that they are right now?
Yeah, good deal. Good deal, Patrick. Thanks for adding that you didn't forget.
No, I'm really done. I'm done on the budget this time.
It's okay, you're done. All right, so Senate Bill 79, the non-certified teacher pilot program.
Yeah, made it out of subcommittee last week. It's sitting in the full Senate Education Committee, scheduled for review on Wednesday, February 26th. This is an interesting bill. PSTA opposes non-certified teaching as a general rule because we believe that teaching is a certified profession for a reason, and that educator preparation matters for student achievement, for longevity in the profession. We could do a whole podcast on that. S79 is a little different, though, in the sense that it's a non-certified teacher pilot program. So it's a 5-year program that, at the recommendation of PSTA, the subcommittee last week included sunset language that literally will phase out the program in 5 years unless the legislature 5 years from now chooses to reauthorize and extend the program. So this is a true pilot in every sense of the word. And under the pilot, public schools, traditional public schools, could hire up to 10% of their teacher workforce from non-certified individuals if the school is rated excellent, below average, or unsatisfactory on the state report card. And we do a whole podcast on why those three, I guess. But the key here, from PSTA's lens, is that these individuals that are serving as non-certified teachers under S79 are different than non-certified teachers that we've seen in some places like Texas and Utah that have basically just said, come one, come all, come teach.
Yeah.
S79, to qualify to be a non-certified teacher under this pilot program, an individual must have a bachelor's degree related to their teaching field. So if I got a bachelor's degree in art history, I am not going to get to go teach as a non-certified math teacher.
Right.
Maybe I can teach art, but I'm not teaching math. So I got to have a bachelor's degree. I have to pass background checks, just like everybody else that works in a school. I have to do pre-service training identified by my district that PSTA strenuously hopes deals with law, education law and special ed and things that you better know about before you set foot in a classroom. And the non-certified individual, once employed, must pursue certification within 3 years. So you cannot indefinitely remain as a non-certified teacher. Would, in an ideal world, PSTA like to make sure that everybody that walks into a classroom has certification all day, 100%? But we also acknowledge there's over 1,000 vacant teaching positions right now, and those vacant teaching positions are either being filled by underqualified or not qualified at all long-term subs who don't have any background in their teaching area, or the vacant positions are just being dissolved and class sizes are going up. Neither of those are good outcomes for students or for the teachers in the building. So if faced with the choice of long-term sub who may or may not have a background in the teaching area, or non-certified teacher who's got a bachelor's degree, who's going to go into teacher prep, who has pre-service training, that's a better outcome. Now, I personally think that this bill is hunting for unicorns, because I don't think there's a lot of
people.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people with a bachelor's degree in chemistry that is just going to one day wake up and say, you know what? Teaching, that's what the calling should have been. But, my youngest daughter tells me unicorns do exist.
They do.
So if that unicorn's out there and that can help one classroom of students.
It's a lot.
go for it.
Yeah.
It's a 5-year pilot, so I think that it is certain this bill will pass the Senate. They passed this thing several times last session, and I think it has a strong chance of passing the House once it gets over there.
Yeah, and I think, Patrick, both of us know some teachers now of record that may have gone through like the PACE program, that were in a different career, that, PACE is similar to what you just explained, that are phenomenal teachers that chose teaching as a second career. And I think, while we believe that certification is important, this has an element of that. And some of the parameters in there can ensure that our students are getting someone that, one, at least has a background in the area, that brings a different perspective, that probably can expose them to some things in that content area that maybe someone that went the traditional route may not have access to.
Absolutely.
So I think this will be an interesting bill to watch for sure, to see how it pans out, because I agree. I don't think there are 5,000 people out there that will probably fit in this mold, but if this bill passes and there's a couple dozen or even more.
Yeah, and maybe I hesitate to use an analogy on a podcast that I haven't used out loud before, so this may be a train wreck as it comes out of my mouth. Listening to you talk about PACE, the people that I think are most likely to participate in this non-certified pilot program are the people that are likely to enroll in PACE or one of the alternative certification programs that exist. So the analogy I would use is this pilot program is like a runway to PACE. Because right now, you can't start in PACE until you do all the summer coursework, and that might knock you out of the classroom for a year and knock out your earnings potential for a year.
Yep.
But since this non-certified pilot requires you to enroll in a certification pathway within 3 years, maybe that first year where you got the itch to teach, you're in as a non-certified teacher, you enroll in PACE, and going into year 2, you've got that PACE stuff under your belt to have the alternative certificate that a program like PACE can issue to you.
Yep.
So that's what I'm seeing, but it's the beauty of a pilot. If that's not how it plays out 5 years from now, the legislature doesn't have to reauthorize the thing.
That's right. Good deal. Well, thank you for that, Patrick. Let's wrap up with ESAs.
Yeah, no, it's the evergreen. If anybody had education scholarship accounts on their education bingo card for 2025,
come on,
I hope you had a whole row of ESA, because you would have a bingo.
Or Pokino. You played Pokino before?
I have not.
I played Pokino. Just a little commercial break for Pokino. I played Pokino for the first time at the Columbia Museum of Art 2 weeks ago with my wife. We went to an event.
You're so cultured.
And I try to be, Patrick. And I love the game because it's like bingo, but Pokino, this particular game, highlighted African-American art. And so when they called out Queen of Hearts, they would have a painting or an artistic piece from a well-known artist from South Carolina or some of our neighboring states. And they would talk about that artist, and then you would put your little chip on there. It was pretty good. And so I feel
like there's actually an instructional strategy hidden in there too. You could absolutely turn that into a classroom lesson. God,
absolutely.
Teachers were the worst.
I love it. And here's where poker comes into play. So if two people yell out Pokino, it's based on the hand that you won with.
Oh.
So if you have a royal flush, or if you have a bunch of kings and aces, it's going to outweigh the number. I'm not a poker player, obviously, but that's where the poker comes into play.
I love it.
That was not planned, guys. Sorry for that commercial break, but if you have never played Pokino, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, if there's no podcast next week, Pokino, come on down to West Columbia.
No gambling took place in part of this episode.
All right, education scholarship accounts. Let's
go there.
Keep this simple. Last week, the House Education and Public Works Committee took up S62, the Senate's bill to reinstate the ability to use education scholarship accounts for private school tuition, because the state Supreme Court struck down that ability in the fall. The House Education and Public Works Committee struck the entire bill and inserted their own version. But by and large, they maintained the language that the Senate put in. So there were some really good amendments added during Senate floor debate about transparency, about accountability, about safety. Senators Massey and Ott and Devine and some others, and Senator Johnson had some good language. The House kept that. The Education and Public Works Committee did. Basically, they changed 3 really important things. Number 1, they changed the funding source. The Senate was going to fund ESAs exclusively out of the lottery scholarship account under the premise that lottery funds are not public funds in the sense construed by the Constitution, so it would get around the constitutional issue. The House struck that out and simply leaves it up to the budget writers, the Ways and Means and the Finance Committee, to determine where to pull the funding from. The way they're trying to get around the constitutionality issue is they create a new position, a literal trustee of the Education Scholarship Trust Fund. And this individual would be appointed by the state superintendent of education and serve at her will. And the argument here is that allegedly the dissenting opinion of the state Supreme Court decision last fall alluded that if it was a true trust fund administered by an actual trustee, then the dollars are no longer public. They're the trust fund's dollars, and the benefit to the private school could not be construed as a direct benefit from public dollars. It would be an indirect benefit because the public dollars went to the trust, and then the trustee directed the funds to the private school. My head hurt just saying that out loud, but it's a different paradigm, so they're changing the funding stream. Number two, they are eliminating the income threshold for eligibility. The Senate, that go away after 3 years at full implementation. So current law, at full implementation, a student can only receive an ESA if their family is at or below 400% of poverty, which for a family of four this year is just under $130,000 a year. The House bill in full implementation in 2027-28 eliminates the income eligibility criteria altogether. So if you're a family making $60 million a year, you can apply for an ESA. Now, to be fair, they set up priority enrollment windows, and they give first priority to families making less than 300% of poverty. So what they're doing, in effect, is if families with 300% of poverty apply and they gobble up all the available ESAs, then the family making $60 million a year won't get an ESA because there's not one left available. But the impact of that is mitigated by the third big change they made. Current law and the Senate version caps the number of ESAs at $15,000 per year, full implementation in 2027. The House eliminates the $15,000 ESA cap in 2027 and says that they will hand out as many ESAs as are appropriated by the General Assembly. Well, that's basically a universal program. And I'll just be frank, I got a lot of heartburn about that last piece simply because it's one of two things. It's either, number one, deceptive to families because, when you think of life or Palmetto Fellows, the higher ed scholarships, if families, they know that if their kid meets the academic criteria, the eligibility criteria, they get the scholarship. Under the House plan, a family could be eligible for an ESA. They could apply for it. They could think they're going to get it, but then they find out that the General Assembly didn't fund enough ESAs, and come May, when the budget's done, or June, what they thought they were getting, they're not getting. If that's not the outcome, then if the outcome is we're just going to fund for everyone who applies for one, well, the fiscal impact on that could be massive. When you look at states like Arizona and Florida that have gone to universal, the trend has been about the total size of the ESA program will be somewhere between 8 to 10% of your public spending will go to ESAs. So if state aid to classrooms is $4.5 billion, that means this becomes a $450 million program annually. That's a lot of money, and it's got to come from somewhere. It's not going to come from tax increases. It can't just come from K-12 education, so it's going to have to come from somewhere.
Yeah, that's a lot, Patrick. And so you definitely highlight some changes from the previous, I guess, what the Senate passed, and so we need to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, the House will take it up this Wednesday, most likely the 26th. They'll probably pass it on the 26th, and then it's going to set up a conference committee between the House and the Senate.
Yeah. So make sure that you are paying attention to our updates via our LAN and obviously this podcast so you can know how to interact with your policymakers on this piece of legislation. We fully expected versions of this to pass both the Senate and the House. We knew they would be different and so there are some pretty significant differences between the Senate and the House version. So
yeah, and the Senate's rejected some of the House stuff, like the elimination of the income eligibility threshold. The Senate was going to raise it to 600% in the original bill. An amendment was introduced on the floor of Senate debate to lower it back to 400%. That passed 30-11, which indicates the Senate didn't even have the will to go to 600%. More or less, just get rid of the income threshold altogether. So it's going to set up some interesting debate and eventual compromise. I don't see any path where this thing doesn't get to the governor's desk by the end of this year. It's a priority for the majority party in both chambers. They've got a lot riding on this, but I think that the final version of this bill is still very much to be determined.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Patrick. And as we wrap up this episode, any final thoughts for the people?
No, I know this one was lengthy, but you take a week off. We got a lot to pack in. I'm just happy to have you back in the office after you've been celebrated as one of the 12 most influential human beings on planet Earth in Charleston. If you have not read the Post-Courier to see the article about how Craig King is moving and shaking the state, check it out. It's worth your time.
Wow, Patrick.
Yeah, you can't cut it out now because we just recorded a 20-plus minute podcast.
26
if you cut
minutes.
It out, it's going to be awkward.
Yeah, it's going to be very awkward, Patrick. I appreciate that. Thank you for helping contribute to the work that I do. I couldn't do it without you and so many other people. So appreciate that. I think I mentioned this earlier. Tomorrow we have Lancaster Teacher Forum. Wednesday we have Edgefield. And then on Thursday we have a group of students from 5 of our universities and colleges across the state. Our PSTA student chapters are visiting the State House on Thursday. And on Saturday, we have an Ed Camp Palmetto. So if you're in the Low Country or planning a trip to come to the Low Country, we would love to see you at Charleston Southern. Register today. It's been another impactful episode of the PSTA podcast. I'm Craig King, your host, with your favorite guest, Patrick Kelly. We'll see you next time.